The 13th time, my boss, Richard Martinez, looked me in the eye and said, "Keep trying, maybe next time." With that fake politician smile, something inside me snapped. Not in an explosive way. No, this was different. It was the kind of cold, calculated snap that comes after 15 years of loyalty gets you absolutely nowhere. 6 months later, he'd call me 48 times in 3 days. By then, their entire system would be in complete chaos, and I'd be the only one who could fix it. But we'll get to that part. Let me take you back to the beginning, when I still believed that hard work and dedication actually mattered. My name is Michael Thompson, and for 15 years, I poured my soul into data flow solutions. 15 years of staying until 2 a.m. to fix critical bugs in their banking system. 15 years of missing Emma's soccer games and school plays because the company needed me. 15 years of watching my wife Linda fall asleep alone while I debugged code that kept their clients' millions secure. I remember the night everything started to change, even though I didn't know it then. It was Emma's 10th birthday, and I'd promised, sworn on everything holy, that I'd be home by 6 for dinner. Linda had spent all afternoon making Emma's favorite chocolate cake from scratch, the kind with 3 layers and rainbow sprinkles that takes forever. At 5:45 p.m., just as I was packing up my laptop, Richard burst into my office. "Michael, thank God you're still here. The Wilson bank system is throwing error codes, and their overnight processing starts in 2 hours. If this fails, we're looking at a potential lawsuit." I stared at him, my car keys already in my hand. "Richard, it's Emma's birthday. I promised I'd be home." I know, and I feel terrible about this, but you're the only one who understands that system. Remember, you built most of it yourself." He put his hand on my shoulder, that gesture he used when he needed something. "Just get it stable, then you can go. Shouldn't take more than an hour." 6 hours later, at 11:30 p.m., I finally walked through my front door. The house was dark. Emma's birthday cake sat untouched on the kitchen counter, 10 candles still standing like tiny soldiers waiting for a battle that never came. I found a note in Linda's handwriting. "Emma waited until 9. She saved you a piece. It's in the fridge." I crept upstairs and peeked into Emma's room. She was asleep, still wearing her birthday dress, her face streaked with dried tears. On her nightstand was a drawing she'd made, our family holding hands under a rainbow, with "Happy Birthday to Me" written in purple crayon. That night, I sat in my home office and did something I'd never done before. I started documenting everything. Every late night, every missed family moment, every innovation I'd created for the company. I called it my contribution log, but really, it was evidence. The system I'd saved that night, it was my design. The security protocols that protected 50 million in daily transactions, mine. The backup procedures that had prevented 3 major data breaches, all mine. I'd built Dataflow's entire technical infrastructure from the ground up, and everyone knew it. But here's what I discovered that night. Digging through old emails and performance reviews, I wasn't building a career. I was building a prison. The first time I was passed over for promotion was in 2018. Richard called me into his office with that same fake smile. "Michael, I've got some news about the senior developer position." I sat up straighter. I'd been working toward this for 3 years. "Now, I want you to know that you were absolutely our top choice. Your technical skills are unmatched, and your dedication is, well, it's inspiring." I waited for the but. but the board feels you need more management experience before we can promote you to a leadership role. I've got you enrolled in a leadership course for next quarter. This is just temporary, Michael. Keep developing those skills, and next time, the position is yours. Next time. Those two words would haunt me for the next 5 years. The second time was 6 months later. The board wants to see more client-facing experience. The third time, we need someone with certification in the new frameworks. The fourth, budget constraints, but definitely next quarter. By the seventh rejection, I'd earned 3 additional certifications, completed 2 leadership programs, and personally managed relationships with our 5 biggest clients. I'd also trained 2 junior developers who were subsequently promoted above me. By the 10th rejection, I'd started to notice a pattern. Every excuse Richard gave me was followed by the promotion of someone with exactly half my experience and qualifications. Someone who happened to be related to a board member or a fraternity brother or the son of a major client. The 11th time, Richard didn't even bother with excuses. We've decided to go with Brian for this position. He brings a fresh perspective. Brian, 26 years old, 2 years of experience, and a direct report to me who still asked how to perform basic database queries. His fresh perspective was apparently worth more than my 15 years of institutional knowledge. The 12th rejection came with a new twist. Michael, I need you to train Sarah for the technical director role. She'll need to understand all your systems and processes. Sarah was Richard's niece. She'd been with the company for exactly 8 months. But it was the 13th rejection that broke something fundamental inside me. This time, it wasn't just about a promotion. They were creating a new position, Chief Technology Officer, essentially recognizing that data flow needed someone to oversee all the technical systems I'd built. I walked into Richard's office that Tuesday morning with 15 years of performance reviews, system documentation, and client testimonials. I'd prepared a presentation showing how my innovations had saved the company over $10 million in the past 3 years alone. Richard barely looked at my materials. Michael, you know how much we value your contributions. You're the backbone of our technical operations. But the CTO position requires someone with executive experience. What kind of executive experience? Well, big picture thinking, strategic vision, the ability to interface with C-suite executives. I stared at him. Richard, I've been interfacing with our clients' CTOs for 5 years. I designed the strategic technical roadmap that the board approved last quarter. What exactly am I missing? He shifted in his chair, that familiar discomfort when he knew his reasoning didn't hold water. Look, Michael, keep trying. Maybe next time we'll have something that's a better fit for your skill set. That's when he flashed that smile. That practiced, empty smile that I'd seen him use on difficult clients and disappointed employees. In that moment, I realized something profound. Richard didn't see me as a person with ambitions and a family depending on my career advancement. He saw me as a resource to be managed, a technical asset that was useful exactly where it was. I walked back to my office in a daze. My hands were steady as I opened my laptop, but inside, everything was shifting. I pulled up my email and typed a message to my wife. Linda, can we talk tonight after Emma goes to bed? I think it's time for a change. Then I did something I'd never done in 15 years. I opened a private browser window and started looking at job postings. The interesting thing about being indispensable is that it makes you valuable to everyone except the people who take you for granted. Within an hour, I'd found 12 positions at competing firms that offered 40% more than my current salary. 3 of them were CTO roles, but I didn't apply. Not yet. Instead, I started to plan. That night, after Linda and I talked for 3 hours about our future, after she cried from relief when I told her I was finally ready to leave, after we dreamed about what our life could look like, if I worked somewhere that valued me, I went back to my computer. I opened a new document and titled it Transition Plan. But it wasn't the kind of transition plan Richard would have wanted to see. Over the next 6 months, I became the most helpful, dedicated employee Dataflow had ever seen. I documented everything, but selectively. I created comprehensive guides for all the routine maintenance tasks. I wrote detailed explanations of the user-facing systems. I even recorded video tutorials for the basic troubleshooting procedures. What I didn't document were the critical thinking processes, the decision trees that determined when a system warning was serious versus routine, the undocumented workarounds for the 3 major bugs that I'd never had time to properly fix because I was too busy training other people for promotions I should have gotten. I didn't document the relationships I'd built with our key vendors, the verbal agreements that kept our costs low, or the personal connections that got us priority support when systems failed. Most importantly, I didn't document the security backdoors I'd built for system recovery, the ones that bypassed normal authentication protocols when the primary systems failed. I'd created them during a major crisis 3 years earlier, when a power outage had corrupted our main databases. Richard had been in a panic, screaming about lawsuits and lost data, while I calmly rebuilt everything through recovery protocols that I designed but never officially implemented. Those backdoors were my insurance policy, known only to me. During those 6 months, I also did something else. I got to know James Harrison, the CEO of Technova Solutions, Dataflow's biggest competitor. We met at a cybersecurity conference in Denver, and over drinks, he mentioned his frustration with his current technical team. The problem with most CTOs, James said, swirling his whiskey, is that they're either great at technology or great at business, but rarely both. I need someone who understands both the technical complexity and the human cost of poor leadership. I listened carefully and said very little. But when he asked for my card, I gave it to him. 3 weeks later, James called me personally. Michael, I've been asking around about you. Everyone in the industry knows your work. Dataflow's reputation for technical excellence is really your reputation, isn't it? I've been fortunate to work with great teams, I said diplomatically. Cut the modest crap. I've seen your fingerprints on every major innovation they've rolled out in the past decade. My question is, why are you still there? That was a good question. Why was I still there? Change is complicated when you have a family, I said. What if change came with a 60% salary increase, equity, and the authority to build a technical team your way? I was quiet for a long time. I'd need to think about it. Think fast. I'm not the only one who's noticed you're undervalued. That weekend, Linda and I took Emma to the zoo. While we watched the elephants, Emma asked me why I seemed happier lately. Daddy's just excited about some new possibilities at work, sweetheart. Are you going to get that promotion you've been wanting? Linda and I exchanged glances over Emma's head. Maybe something even better, I said. The following Monday, I walked into Richard's office with a letter. What's this? He asked, not bothering to look up from his computer. My 2 weeks' notice. His head snapped up so fast I thought he might get whiplash. You're what? I'm resigning, Richard. My last day will be Friday after next. He stared at the letter like it was written in a foreign language. Michael, let's not be hasty. If this is about the CTO position, we can discuss other opportunities. It's not about one position, Richard. It's about 15 years of other opportunities. Look, I know you're disappointed, but you're being emotional. Let's schedule a meeting for later this week. I'm sure we can work something out. I stood up. There's nothing to work out. I've accepted a position elsewhere. Where? Technova Solutions. I'll be their new CTO. The color drained from Richard's face. Technova wasn't just a competitor. They were Dataflow's biggest rival for enterprise clients. You can't be serious. After everything this company has done for you? I almost laughed. After everything I've done for this company, you mean? Michael, be reasonable. What do they want? We can match it. Can you match 15 years of respect, Richard? Can you match being valued for my contributions instead of being taken for granted? He was quiet for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning. Finally, he leaned back in his chair with a calculating look. Fine, if that's how you want to play this. But I hope you realize you're burning bridges here. This is a small industry, Michael. Word gets around about people who aren't team players. That was the moment I knew I'd made the right decision. Even facing the loss of his most critical employee, Richard's instinct was to threaten rather than reflect. Have a good day, Richard. I walked out of his office and back to my desk, where I spent the next 2 weeks creating the most comprehensive handover documentation in corporate history. Every system, every process, every routine maintenance task was meticulously explained. Everything except the things that actually mattered. On my last day, Richard called me into his office one final time. Michael, I want you to know, there are no hard feelings. You've been a valuable team member, and I wish you success. Thank you. I do hope you'll be available if we have any questions about the systems transition. I looked at him for a long moment. I'm sure your team will figure it out. After all, you've got some really fresh perspectives now. He missed the sarcasm entirely. That Friday evening, I cleaned out my desk while the office was empty. 15 years of my professional life fit into 2 cardboard boxes. A few personal photos, some technical books, and a coffee mug Emma had made me in 2nd grade that said, "World's Best Daddy." As I walked to the parking garage, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. I drove home through the Friday traffic, and for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't thinking about system alerts or weekend emergencies. I was thinking about Emma's soccer game tomorrow and the family dinner we'd planned for Sunday. When I walked through the front door, Linda was in the kitchen making dinner, and Emma was at the dining room table doing homework. "Daddy!" Emma jumped up and ran to me. "You're home early." "I'm going to be home early a lot more often," I said, scooping her up in a hug. That weekend was perfect. We went to Emma's soccer game, had a picnic in the park, and I helped her build a treehouse that I'd been promising to make for 2 years. Sunday night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those serious 10-year-old eyes. "Daddy, are you happier now?" "Much happier, sweetheart." "Good. You were sad for a really long time." Kids see everything, don't they? Monday morning, I started my new job at Technova. The difference was immediate. James introduced me to the team as the guy who's going to help us revolutionize how we approach client solutions. My first week was spent meeting with department heads, learning about their challenges, and being asked for my opinion on strategic decisions. It was everything I'd hoped my career could be. Meanwhile, 40 miles away at Dataflow, the first cracks were starting to show. The first call came on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. I was making Emma pancakes when my phone buzzed with Richard's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. By noon, he'd called 12 more times. I was in a strategy meeting with Technova's senior team when my phone lit up again. James glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. "Popular guy today, aren't you?" I turned the phone face down. "Just some unfinished business from my old job." That was an understatement. 3 weeks had passed since I'd left Dataflow, and according to the industry grapevine, things were getting interesting over there. My former colleague Sarah, the one who'd been promoted instead of me, had sent a cryptic text the week before. "The wheels are starting to come off. Richard's been asking if anyone has your personal number." I'd ignored that too, but the calls kept coming. By Thursday, I had 43 missed calls from Richard, 16 from other Dataflow executives, and increasingly frantic voicemails that I wasn't listening to. Linda noticed my phone buzzing constantly during Emma's school play that evening. "Aren't you going to answer that?" she whispered as we watched our daughter deliver her lines as a tree in the environmental awareness production. "It's not important," I said, but I was starting to feel curious. What could possibly be so urgent that Richard would call me nearly 50 times in 3 days? That night, after Emma was asleep, Linda and I sat in our living room while I finally played the voicemails. They started professional enough. "Michael, it's Richard. When you have a moment, could you give me a call? We have a few technical questions about the transition." But they quickly escalated. "Michael, I really need to hear from you. We're having some issues with the banking system, and the documentation you left isn't quite comprehensive enough for our needs." By Thursday afternoon, Richard's voice had taken on an edge of panic. "Michael, look, I know you're probably busy at your new job, but we have a serious situation here. The overnight processing failed for Wilson Bank, and we can't figure out why. Their compliance officer is threatening to pull their contract. Please, just call me back." The final voicemail, left at 11:30 p.m. Thursday night, was barely coherent. "Michael, I'm going to be straight with you. We're in trouble. Real trouble. The backup systems aren't responding the way they're supposed to, and nobody here understands how you built the recovery protocols. I know I wasn't always... Look, I know we had our differences, but I need your help. The board is asking questions I can't answer. Please." Linda was staring at me with wide eyes. "Michael, what did you do?" "I did exactly what they asked me to do for 15 years, I said calmly. "I made myself indispensable." Friday morning, I was reviewing Technova's quarterly projections when James knocked on my office door. "You might want to see this," he said, holding up his phone. "Dataflow just put out a press release about temporary service interruptions for scheduled maintenance." I pulled up the press release on my computer. It was corporate speak for, "Our systems are failing, and we don't know why." "Interesting timing," James said with a knowing smile. "Right after their star technical architect leaves for a competitor. Pure coincidence, I'm sure." "Of course." He paused in the doorway. "By the way, I got a call this morning from someone at Dataflow. They wanted to know if we'd consider a consulting arrangement for technical services. I told them we were focused on our own projects. Probably for the best." That weekend was blissful. No emergency calls, no system alerts, no urgent emails marked critical. Respond immediately. Linda and I took Emma to the farmer's market Saturday morning, something I'd never been able to do because weekends at Dataflow were for catching up on the week's emergencies. As we picked out apples and listened to a local band, my phone rang. Unknown number, but with a local area code. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Michael? The voice was strained, desperate. Thank God. This is Jennifer Walsh from Dataflow's board of directors. I knew Jennifer. She'd been present at several of the meetings where I'd been passed over for promotion. How did you get this number? Look, I'm calling you personally because we have a crisis situation. Our systems have been failing for the past week, and Richard tells me you might be able to help us understand what's going wrong. I watched Emma chase a butterfly through the market stalls while Linda bought fresh corn. This was what I'd been missing during all those years of emergency weekends. I'm sorry, Jennifer, but I don't work for Dataflow anymore. I'd suggest consulting the documentation I provided during my transition. We've been through all of it, multiple times, but the systems aren't behaving the way the documentation suggests they should. It's like there are processes running that aren't documented anywhere. Of course there were. Have you considered hiring a consulting firm? There are several excellent technical service companies that specialize in system recovery. We've tried 3 different firms. None of them can make sense of your architecture. Michael, I'm going to be direct with you. We're facing potential lawsuits from 2 major clients. Our data integrity is compromised, and our security protocols aren't responding to standard recovery procedures. We need someone who understands these systems from the ground up. That sounds like a significant challenge. There was a long pause. What would it take to get you to consult for us? Just temporarily, until we can stabilize things. I stopped walking. I'm sorry, what? As a consultant, name your rate. We're prepared to pay whatever it takes. The irony was beautiful. For 15 years, I'd asked for recognition, advancement, and fair compensation. Now, they were offering me a blank check. Jennifer, I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy in my new position. Besides, I signed a non-compete agreement when I left. We could work around that. The board could vote to waive the non-compete for consulting services. That's generous, but I'm not interested. Michael, please. Richard may have made some mistakes in how he handled your career development, but there are 200 employees at Dataflow whose jobs depend on getting these systems stable. There it was, the guilt card. The same manipulation that had kept me working late nights and missing family time for 15 years. Those employees will figure it out, I said. After all, Dataflow has hired some really talented people with fresh perspectives. I'm sure they'll find innovative solutions. Another long pause. What if Richard weren't part of the equation? Excuse me. What if Richard were no longer in his current role? Would that change your willingness to help? I almost laughed. Are you asking me to consult for Dataflow on the condition that you fire my former boss? I'm asking what it would take to get you to help save 200 jobs. I'll think about it. I hung up and rejoined my family at a honey vendor's stand. Linda looked at me questioningly. Work stuff, I said. Dataflow? Yeah. What did they want? I picked up a jar of wildflower honey and read the label carefully. They want me to come back and fix everything. Are you going to? I thought about Richard's fake smile, about 13 rejections and 15 years of being taken for granted. about Emma's birthday cake sitting untouched on the counter. Not the way they want me to. Monday morning brought more calls. This time, it wasn't just Richard and Jennifer. I had voicemails from Dataflow's CFO, their head of operations, and someone from their legal department. The situation was clearly escalating beyond technical problems. At lunch, I finally called Sarah. "Michael, oh my God, I'm so glad you called. It's chaos here." "So I've heard. What's really going on?" "Everything's falling apart. The Wilson Bank contract got suspended pending a security audit. Morrison Industries is threatening to sue us for data breach damages. And Richard's been called into closed-door meetings with the board 3 times this week." What kind of data breach? That's the weird part. There's no evidence of external intrusion. But the system logs show unauthorized access attempts that triggered all our security protocols. The weird thing is, the access attempts are coming from inside our own network, but none of our current staff has the credentials that are showing up in the logs. I was quiet for a moment. Those would be my old administrative credentials, the ones I'd built into the system for emergency access, the ones that were supposed to be dormant unless specific conditions were met. "Have they tried contacting me directly?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Richard's been trying to reach you all week. He's desperate, Michael. I've never seen him like this. Yesterday, I heard him on a call with the board explaining why the former technical lead isn't available for consultation." "What did he say?" "He blamed you. Said you'd left them in an impossible situation by not providing adequate transition documentation. Said you were probably violating your professional ethics by not helping during a crisis." The audacity was breathtaking. "Sarah, can I ask you something? In all the documentation I left, did anyone find the disaster recovery protocols?" "That's what everyone keeps asking about. Richard says you must have those documented somewhere, but nobody can find them." "Did anyone think to look in the system architecture files under emergency access procedures?" I don't think so. Hold on, let me check." I could hear her typing. Oh wow. Michael, there's a whole folder here labeled Emergency Protocols, Administrative Access Only. Why didn't anyone check this before?" "Because Richard assumed I was like everyone else who'd worked for him, someone who followed standard procedures and documented everything in obvious places." "Should I tell him about this folder?" I considered the question. Richard was probably hours away from being terminated by the board. Dataflow was facing potential bankruptcy from client defections and lawsuit settlements. 200 people were at risk of losing their jobs, including Sarah, who'd only been caught in the crossfire of corporate politics. "Sarah, I want you to do something for me." "What?" "I want you to forward that folder to Jennifer Walsh on the board. Not to Richard, directly to Jennifer." "Why not Richard?" "Because in about 24 hours, Richard's not going to be in a position to do anything about it." That evening, I was helping Emma with her math homework when Jennifer Walsh called again. "Michael, I don't know what game you're playing, but one of your former colleagues just sent me a folder of documents that explains exactly how to restore our systems. That's wonderful news." The documents are dated from 3 years ago, and they require administrative access that only you have. I'm sure your IT team can create new administrative access. Michael, stop playing games with me. These protocols require specific security keys that you never provided during your transition. I wasn't asked to provide them. You knew we'd need them. Jennifer, I provided comprehensive documentation for all routine operations, system maintenance, and troubleshooting procedures. Emergency disaster recovery protocols are typically handled by senior technical leadership, the kind of role I was repeatedly told I wasn't qualified for. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. What do you want? I want you to understand something. For 15 years, I built Dataflow's technical infrastructure while being told I wasn't management material. I created systems that saved your company millions while being passed over for promotions 13 times. I trained people to do my job while watching them get the career advancement I earned. And when I finally decided I deserved better, Richard threatened to damage my reputation in the industry. Michael! I'm not finished. This crisis isn't the result of poor documentation or inadequate transition planning. This is what happens when you treat your most valuable assets like disposable resources. You want to know what it would take to get me to help? It would take Richard Martinez's resignation, a public apology to me and every other employee he's systematically undervalued, and a commitment from your board to implement fair promotion practices based on merit rather than politics. You're holding 200 jobs hostage over a personal grudge? I'm not holding anything hostage. I left Dataflow and moved on with my life. You're the one calling me for help with a crisis that your company created through years of poor leadership decisions. If I could guarantee Richard's departure and a formal apology, would you consider helping us? I looked across the room at Linda, who was reading a book while Emma worked on her homework at the kitchen table. This was what family time looked like when you weren't constantly interrupted by work emergencies. I'll consider it. The next morning, James knocked on my office door with a huge grin. You need to see this, he said, showing me his phone. Dataflow just announced the immediate resignation of their VP of Technology Operations, effective today. I pulled up the press release on my computer. It was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism. Richard Martinez has decided to pursue other opportunities, and we wish him well in his future endeavors. 30 minutes later, Jennifer Walsh called. It's done. Richard's gone. The board voted unanimously to accept his resignation this morning. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. The question is, are you willing to help us now? I thought about Richard's fake smile and all those years of maybe next time. I'll consider a consulting arrangement. My rate is $500 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 40 hours payable in advance. And I'll need the board to issue a formal statement acknowledging my contributions to the company and apologizing for the inadequate recognition I received during my tenure. $500 an hour? Michael, that's non-negotiable. And Jennifer? I'll also need a guarantee that any employees who were promoted over me during my time there will publicly acknowledge that their advancement was the result of my mentoring and technical contributions. There was a long silence. I'll need to discuss this with the board. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, I'm no longer interested. I hung up and went back to my Technova work, but I couldn't concentrate. Part of me felt satisfaction at Richard's downfall, but part of me felt something unexpected. Pity. He'd created his own destruction through 15 years of poor leadership, but he was still a human being with a family and career that was now in ruins. At 4:47 p.m., Jennifer called back. The board has approved your terms, all of them. 2 days later, I walked into the Dataflow offices for the first time in a month. The place felt smaller somehow, less important than I remembered. Sarah met me in the lobby. "Michael, thank you so much for coming back. Everyone's been hoping you'd help us." "I'm not back, Sarah. I'm consulting. There's a difference." The next week was surreal. I walked through offices where I'd spent 15 years being undervalued, now being treated like a returning hero. People who'd barely acknowledged me before were asking for my opinions on system improvements and strategic technical decisions. It took exactly 6 hours to restore full system functionality. The problems hadn't been complicated. They were just the result of people trying to work with systems they didn't understand, making changes that cascaded into bigger failures. As I worked, I discovered something interesting. The technical team was actually quite capable. They'd been hobbled by Richard's micromanagement and his insistence on approving every significant decision. Without him, they were already starting to implement innovative solutions. On my final day of consulting, the board held an all-hands meeting. Jennifer stood at the front of the conference room and read a prepared statement. "We want to formally acknowledge the extraordinary contributions of Michael Thompson during his 15 years with Dataflow. Michael's technical expertise and innovative solutions were fundamental to our company's success, and we recognize that his contributions were not adequately acknowledged during his tenure. We apologize for this oversight and are grateful for his assistance during our recent transition." It was everything I'd asked for, but hearing it felt anticlimactic. The validation I'd craved for 15 years felt hollow, now that I'd already moved beyond needing it. After the meeting, I cleaned out the temporary office they'd given me and prepared to leave for the final time. As I walked through the parking garage, I heard someone calling my name. I turned to see Richard Martinez walking toward me. He looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled suit. The kind of exhausted that comes from sleepless nights and career-ending stress. "Michael, wait." I stopped walking but didn't approach him. "I wanted to talk to you." "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Richard." "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I waited. "I know you think I got what I deserved, and maybe you're right. But I want you to know that I never intended to hold you back maliciously. I thought I was managing resources effectively." "Resources?" "People. I thought I was managing people effectively." "There's your problem, Richard. You saw people as resources to be managed instead of humans with ambitions and families depending on their career growth." He nodded slowly. "I've had a lot of time to think this week about the decisions I made, the opportunities I denied you, the way I justified it to myself." "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I was so focused on maintaining control that I never stopped to consider what I was controlling. You weren't trying to undermine me or take my job. You just wanted to grow in your career." I looked at him for a long moment. He was right, but his realization had come about 5 years too late. "Richard, I hope you learned something from this experience. I hope your next team gets the leadership they deserve. There might not be a next team. Word travels fast in this industry." I felt a flicker of the pity I'd experienced earlier. "There will be." "You're not a bad person, Richard. You're just a bad manager. Those are different things, and one of them can be fixed." I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the parking garage. 3 months later, Technova announced its biggest client acquisition in company history, a major banking consortium that had previously worked exclusively with Dataflow. James offered me a partnership stake in the company and a position on the board of directors. 6 months after that, Emma's school held its annual career day. For the first time in her life, I was able to take a day off to talk to her class about technology careers. As I watched her face light up when she introduced me as my dad, the CTO, I realized something profound. The revenge I'd planned against Richard had never been about destroying him. It had been about proving my own worth, but I'd already proven that to the people who mattered: my family, my new colleagues, and most importantly, myself. That evening, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked me the question she'd been asking for months. "Daddy, are you happy now?" "Happier than I've ever been, sweetheart." "Good. You smile a lot more now." "Do I?" "Uh-huh. And you don't look at your phone during dinner anymore." Kids really do see everything. A year later, I received a LinkedIn message from Richard. He'd found a position as a senior project manager at a mid-sized consulting firm, a significant step down from his previous role, but a job nonetheless. The message was brief. "Michael, I wanted you to know that I'm working with a leadership coach to improve my management style. I also wanted to thank you for what you said in the parking garage that day. You were right. Bad manager and bad person are different things. I'm working on fixing the one I can control. I hope you and your family are well." I showed the message to Linda that night. "Are you going to respond?" "I think so. Everyone deserves a second chance to be better." I typed back, "Glad to hear you're growing, Richard. Leadership is a skill like any other. It improves with practice and honest feedback. Wishing you success in your new role." Some stories of workplace revenge end with the villain's complete destruction. Others end with mutual understanding and growth. I prefer the second kind. These days, I leave the office by 5:30 p.m. every day. I've never missed another one of Emma's games or school events. Linda and I have dinner together as a family every night, and weekends are for building tree houses and going to farmers markets. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone who wronged you. Sometimes it's building a life so good that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. But I'll admit, watching Richard beg through 48 missed phone calls was pretty satisfying too.